Welcome back to Tedflix and Chill. We have a very special episode of the Breakfast with Tedflix podcast for you guys this morning. We are going to do a full breakdown of Anakin's final lesson to Ahsoka from the episode Shadow Warrior. This is so cool. It's a post-Return of the Jedi Anakin teaching Ahsoka how to be a fully realized Jedi Master. I mean, come on, how dope is that? Without further ado, let's check out what wisdom the Chosen One has in store for us. Let's go. So previously on Ahsoka, she is on the planet Cetos. She's trying to stop this guy, Baylan Skoll, from finding a map that leads to the big old baddie from the good old Empire days, Grand Admiral Thrawn. And when she's fighting him, he's actually using a technique from our old homeboy, Count Dooku. Yeah, from Attack of the Clones. And that technique is actually called Dune Mach. What is Dune Mach, you may ask? Well, it's literally a mind game. It's like psychological warfare in the middle of the lightsaber fight. So literally you just taunt and mock your opponent in the middle of the lightsaber fight in order to break down their mental state. And it's really effective to use against Jedi who required concentration with the Force. And at this time, Ahsoka is not even sure about how to be a good master and whether she should even have Sabine be her apprentice. So when Baylan starts taunting her about, oh, your former master Anakin, his legacy is of death and destruction, he is literally bringing out Ahsoka's shadow. And what is shadows in a form of? It's in a form of doubt. Oh, what is your legacy? Is it of Anakin or you mean Vader? Oh, you mean that guy with all the death and destruction, that legacy. He's instilling that doubt and bringing out her shadow. And that's where the expression without a shadow of a doubt comes from, because doubt is literally a shadow that clouds your judgment, right? And yeah, obviously this works like a charm against Ahsoka. He is completely off balanced, and literally to the point where he's so off balance, Baylan is able to knock her off the edge of a cliff. Yeah, see ya. You just got yeeted off a cliff, Ahsoka. And once she gets knocked into the water, we see her wash up somewhere. Oh, wonder where she is. Oh, but then she wakes up and she realizes she's in some kind of Force spirit realm. And essentially this realm is known as the world between worlds. You've seen Star Wars Rebels, you know, but this is actually our first time seeing it in live action, which is pretty cool. And then after looking around for a little bit, all of a sudden she hears a familiar voice come from behind her. And she's like, wait, there's no way. Is that who I think it is? Wait. And then she hears, hello, Snips. And then she's like, oh, that is who I think it is. No way. Turns around, boom. Her master, Anakin Skywalker, in the flesh. Or not really in the flesh, more so in the spirit, but you know what I mean. And this scene right here actually reminds me a lot of when Simba is with Rafiki and he's looking in the water, and then all of a sudden he hears his name, Simba, and his eyes get big and he's like, what, father? And then he sees his father in the clouds in the spirit. Just like right here, she hears, hello, Snips, and then her eyes get big and then she ends up seeing Anakin in the spirit. Yeah, just look at Ahsoka's reaction right here. He's like, I didn't expect to see you so soon. And then he's really just like, wait, that actually has to be him. That has to be my master, Anakin Skywalker. And yeah, it's Anakin Skywalker right there. And so just look at that and then look right here, Simba. And he says, father, and looks up, and there's Mufasa, aka James Earl Jones, aka the voice of Darth Vader, right before him. Interesting parallel there. Well, that's not even the end of the Lion King parallels. There's plenty more. Just wait for it. So right here, the episode begins. Ahsoka's just in shock. She's like, Anakin, you look great. Looks like you haven't aged a day after episode 3. Like, what happened? And he's like, what happened to you? You're not the little girl I trained anymore. And she's like, yeah. And speaking of which, what happened? Why am I here? He's like, you lost a fight. And he's like, trust me, you lost a fight pretty badly. Like, it was kind of rough to watch from all the way up here. And he's like, oh, Baylan Skoll. And he's like, oh, that's good that you remember. That's good. And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, means you have a chance. A chance? He's like, to live. Otherwise, you're gonna die. So this part when Anakin's like, you lost a fight, and she's like, oh, I don't remember. And he's like, trust me, you lost. That scene right there is essentially Anakin saying, yeah, right now you're kind of a shadow of your former self. And what do I mean by that? Well, a shadow of your former self means that you're not as impressive, powerful, or healthy as you used to be. And what exactly caused her to be a shadow of her former self? Well, it was Baylan Skoll. He brought out the shadows and the doubt out of Ahsoka. And I actually think this scene is very similar to a scene in Lord of the Rings of the Two Towers. And it's when Gandalf confronts Theoden at Rohan, and he's like, "Theoden, son of Thengar, too long have you sat in the shadows." So hear me out. Gandalf just said, "Theoden, too long have you sat in the shadows." So he's a shadow of his former self? Yes, because he's not as healthy or impressive or as powerful as he used to be. I mean, clearly, just look at him. Definitely a shadow of his former self. And in a way, Anakin was saying that too. Yeah, trust me, you lost. Not as impressive as you used to be, Ahsoka. I'm gonna be honest. That's kind of what he's saying. I definitely believe Anakin thinks that Ahsoka could have beaten Baylan right there had she not had a shadowy, doubtful mindset. And again, the cause of her having that shadowed mindset was Baylan Skoll, who in this case with Theoden would be the Saruman who is controlling Theoden's mind, just like Baylan has a hold over Ahsoka's mind. So yeah, remember this parallel of Anakin being Gandalf, of Ahsoka being Theoden, and of Baylan being Saruman. Let's put a note in this. We'll come back to this in a little bit. Yeah, even though Anakin thinks Ahsoka is a shadow of her former self, he still is impressed that she remembers Baylan Skoll. He's like, "Oh, that's good. You still have a chance to live." She's like, "Okay, want to tell me what's going on?" And he says, "I'm here to finish your training." And she's like, "Training? Well, I'm an old woman. You see that now. What more training do I need? It's a little late for that." And then he drops this little morsel of knowledge and he says, "One is never too old to learn, Snips," which is very, very important for his overall lesson. And again, we're going to put a note in this for later because Anakin saying, "One is never too old to learn, Snips," is so important. I can't emphasize that part enough. One is never too old to learn, Snips. That's so important for his lesson. We're going to come back to that because that's the first beginning point of his training. So just remember that. We are coming back right to the beginning in a little bit. And trust me, you'll know what I mean when I say that. But moving on, Ahsoka's like, "All right, what's the lesson, Master?" And he's like, "Oh, it's simple. Live or die." And right now, he's about that business. And this part's really cool, obviously, because she's like, "I won't fight you." And he's like, "I've heard that before," which is obviously a straight up episode 6 reference. But it's actually not the only episode 6 reference. I have your curiosity? Yeah, trust me, we'll touch on that later. But Anakin goes to work, right? He's, the best lightsaber duel that we've seen in quite some time. He does the behind the back trick. Chef's kiss right there. Oh my goodness, I was freaking out when I first saw this, dude. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. We have episode 3 Anakin getting kicked by Ahsoka in the face. In the face. She's like, "Doesn't look like you have much to offer." And he laughs it off. He's like, "Ha ha ha." So yeah, we're here at the Battle of Teth. This is one of her first Clone War battles. And she's like, what's going on? This is the Clone Wars. He's like, "Yeah, no kidding, bud." I know it's mostly cloudy, but it still is cool to see a young casted Ahsoka and to see Anakin in the Clone Wars armor. Come on. That's pretty sick, dude. We've wanted to see that for such a long time. It's just, again, another chef's kiss to the episode. You can't deny that this episode, or at least this 10-15 minute part of Anakin, is amazing. We've all been wanting this, and we finally got it. Live action Clone Wars and Anakin in full glory. So I just think it's cool how Anakin's able to summon this moment in order to confront her and talk her through what's still holding her back in the current day. So he's like, "Is there a problem? What's going on?" So she explains, "Yeah, all these men are dead, and they're dead because of my orders that I gave." So Ahsoka feels like in order to prevent that or avoid that from happening, that she should stop fighting. And that's a problem that's following her into the current day because she is avoiding getting close to people like Sabine because she doesn't want Sabine or people close to her getting killed. Anakin tries to remind her that, "Hey, I didn't sign up for this either. Me and Obi-Wan, we were supposed to be keepers of the peace, but then the Clone Wars happened, and so now we have to adjust to the times." But in order to shake her out of this funk, he has to remind her, listen, I'm teaching you how to survive and how to literally lead and be a Jedi. And to do that, you're going to have to fight. And here we see the Anakin flashing back and forth into Vader, the shadow of his former self, which is Vader in the suit. Because obviously when Vader got in the suit, he was way less powerful than he would have been before Obi-Wan cut him in half, basically. So Darth Vader in the suit is his shadow. He was a shadow of his former self when he was Darth Vader in the suit. But that's not who he is anymore. And we'll touch on that Darth Vader dark side point later. He isn't embracing or incorporating his shadow. He just accepts it. And that's another key part of the lesson too. Trust me, we'll touch on that. And obviously this scene is important because Anakin's really trying to make it clear to her, if you choose not to fight, then you're choosing to die because you're turning your back on people who need you most. And you think, oh, I'm going to prevent the mistakes from happening or prevent people who follow me from getting hurt, thinking you have to be perfect. That's you trying to hold on when you need to just let go, right? And not be ashamed of what happens in battle that you can't control. And this isn't the only Clone Wars flashback that we get this episode. We also end up getting the Siege of Mandalore, which was so cool to see. I loved Clone Wars Season 7 and these last few episodes of the Siege of Mandalore. And look at that. That is straight up a shot right out of Clone Wars with both of them having their arms folded. And it's so cool to see Anakin's perspective of the Siege of Mandalore. He's like, oh, you did well. You're a warrior now, as I trained you to be. And I just think that's so cool because he was able to call upon the memory of Ahsoka when she felt like she was a true warrior, which is exactly what he needs to remind her of. And then Anakin says what is probably the most important quote for his entire lesson to Ahsoka, which is this: you will be everything that I am. All the knowledge that I possess, just as I inherited knowledge from my master and he from his. You're a part of a legacy. That quote right there is essentially the key for his final lesson to Ahsoka, which is that you are going to be everything that I am, meaning all of the knowledge, the Jedi knowledge that I possess, that I got from my master Obi-Wan, he got from his master Qui-Gon, and so on and so forth. That's the mindset that you need to have in order to be a Jedi master. You have to acknowledge and know that you have a whole line of a legacy of Jedi knowledge that you can pass on to your own apprentice. But at this point, Ahsoka just shakes her head and she says, no, my legacy, it's just of death and war. And at this point, Baylan still has her in the shadows. He still has her mind clouded. And Anakin sees this. He sees right through this. But literally, Baylan is just like a Balrog in the sense that he's a demon who can lie and manipulate you in order to throw you off your game and defeat you. And speaking of Lord of the Rings, we're actually going to jump back to Two Towers because this scene right here of Anakin confronting the shadowed Ahsoka is essentially Gandalf the White purifying shadowed Theoden. Let's break that down. So in Two Towers, when Gandalf says, hearken to me, which means obey, comply to me, meaning he's talking to the shadow, he says, hearken to me, shadow, and he says, I release you from this spell, and then tries to cure shadowed Theoden right there, right? And so Anakin parallels this because he tries to confront shadowed Ahsoka saying, but you're more than that legacy of death and destruction because I'm more than that. But we all know what happens at first when Gandalf tries to cure the shadowed person. It doesn't work. But right here when Ahsoka snips back at him and says, you are more Anakin, but more powerful and more dangerous than anyone realized, that is just like Theoden responding to Gandalf when he's saying, I release you. And what does Theoden say? We get the meme of shadowed Theoden laughing saying, you have no power here, Gandalf the Grey. So again, that's literally a parallel to Ahsoka saying, yeah, you have no power over this, Anakin. You are a legacy of death and destruction. You are more powerful and dangerous than anyone had ever realized. Like, you're the bad guy. And then Anakin just gives her this look like, come on, that's not what I was talking about when I said you are more because I am more. And he really is just like picked off with her at this point. He's like, you're really bringing up this Darth Vader stuff again? Really? Oh, okay. You're still not over that? All right, fine. And right here, I'm actually going to make another parallel back to The Lion King. And it's actually, again, when Mufasa is confronting a shadowed Simba. And he says a quote that's very similar to what Anakin said about, "You are more than what you've become because I am more than my past." Literally, Mufasa almost quotes that exact quote. Literally right here, Mufasa says, "Simba, you have forgotten me." And obviously Simba says, "No, how could I have forgotten you?" But Mufasa says, "You've forgotten who you are, and so have forgotten me." And this is essentially happening with Ahsoka right now, because Ahsoka is forgetting who she is and is forgetting who Anakin really is, which is the carrying on of a legacy of Jedi. And this is further emphasized in the next point Mufasa says. He says, "Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become." Literally exactly the quote that Anakin says pretty much. When Ahsoka says, "But my legacy is of death and destruction," Anakin says, "But you're more than that because I'm more than that." And literally, he's quoting Mufasa. You are more than what you think you have become. You're more than what you think defines you. And Mufasa follows that up saying, "You must take your place in the circle of life." And that's a key element to what Anakin is trying to say, because he wants Ahsoka to take her place in the legacy of the Jedi Master and Apprentice that serves and saves life, the circle of life. Literally, Anakin is having a Mufasa moment with Ahsoka, trying to get her to remember who she is, because everything she's learned that's within inside her is a legacy of Jedi teachings that she's a part of. And the truth that Anakin is trying to get her to realize is that that knowledge of that legacy of Jedi is more than Anakin's dark deeds or her own self-inflicted weaknesses, and that she needs to take her place in the circle of life or in the legacy of the Jedi by passing on her knowledge to her own apprentice and be a true Jedi Master. And again, obviously Mufasa is voiced by James Earl Jones, who did the voice for Darth Vader, so it's cool that we're getting the redeemed Vader having a Mufasa talk with Ahsoka, who obviously Ahsoka is the shadowed Simba in this respect, who is next in line for the throne to be king, just like Ahsoka is next in line to be the next Jedi Master with an apprentice in that line of legacy. And shifting to a different parallel, wrapping up the Two Towers one, when Gandalf the Grey drops his gray cloak and shows he's in all white. He's Gandalf the White now. And then Gandalf says, "I will draw you out, Saruman, as poison is drawn from a wound." It's at that moment when shadowed Theoden is being confronted by the enlightened warrior who has moved past his shadowed self, just like how Anakin has moved past and learned from Vader. Anakin uses that Vader to confront the shadowed Ahsoka. Like, this is the part that I'm thinking is the parallel to Gandalf showing his all-white cloak and confronting the shadowed Theoden. It's this right here. It's Anakin being, live or die. Shows his red Vader lightsaber and confronts Ahsoka, who's shadowed and needs to be confronted by that dark legacy of Vader in order to find out the truth and be purified and cleansed like poison is drawn from a wound. Because she needs to realize that her legacy of Jedi teachings is more than the legacy of Anakin's dark deeds or her own past mistakes. But before we get in the last lightsaber fight with Darth Vader, Red Saber Anakin versus Ahsoka, I actually want to touch on another episode 6 reference that happens right here, right before that fight. And it's when Anakin's like, "Is that what this is about? My Darth Vader legacy? Like, really?" And Ahsoka right here says, "If I am everything that you are," and he right here cuts her off and says, "You've learned nothing, back to the beginning." So what does he mean right here when he says, "You learn nothing, back to the beginning"? Well, at the beginning, he said, "I'm here to finish your training." Right after that, he says, one is never too old to learn, Snips. So when Anakin is saying, you've learned nothing, shame on you, back to the beginning, he's saying, we're starting from square one. You are never too old to learn. So stop being so stubborn in thinking, oh, the Darth Vader legacy, it's of death and destruction. And if I'm going to be everything that you are, clearly you've learned nothing, because the beginning of my lesson was it's never too late to learn. You're never too old to learn. You're never too old to learn and change from your past. Because when Ahsoka is saying it's a little too late for you to finish my training, Anakin literally is almost hearing a past version of himself as Darth Vader, because in episode 6 he says, it's too late for me, son. Let's actually look at that scene real quick. So it's right here on Endor when Luke confronts Darth Vader and he says, come with me, let's get out of here, let's get out of Dodge. And Darth Vader's like, honestly, Obi-Wan once thought as you did, but you don't know the power of the dark side. I must obey my master. And at that point, Anakin is a shadow of his former self. Luke is trying to cure him from that, to escape, come with me. But he's trapped in this Darth Vader mindset, literally, just like Ahsoka is, that, oh, it's too late for me to finish my training. And Vader's like, you don't understand. I must obey my master and the dark side. And Luke's like, I'm not going to turn. You'll be forced to kill me. He says, if that is your destiny, then that's what's going to happen. He says, search your feelings, Father. Come on. I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate. And what does Darth Vader say? He says what Ahsoka says. It is too late for me, son. And then that's the end of their discussion. Him saying, it's too late for me, son. The Emperor will show you the true nature of the Force, which obviously he's clouded by fears, by doubts, by insecurities of not being powerful enough to stop the Emperor. But literally when Anakin is hearing Ahsoka saying, oh, it's a little too late for you to be finishing my training, Anakin's just rolling his eyes like, it's a little too late? You literally sound like me as Darth Vader when I said it's too late for me, son. So obviously he's upset that he's hearing a Darth Vader mindset come from his own Padawan. Because that's the lesson Darth Vader learned in episode 6, is that it's never too late to learn and change. Because he let go of his fear of confronting Palpatine, his master. He let go of his fear of dying by sacrificing himself, and he instead chose the love of his son. He was able to finally actually love his true self by choosing to love his son, because he saved his son and defeated the one who was keeping him trapped in denial in his shadow by overthrowing and killing the Emperor. So that is why Anakin cuts her off right there and says, you've learned nothing, back to the beginning. One is never too old to learn, Snips. It's not ever too late to learn, Snips. Come on, come on. And after he says, you've learned nothing, back to the beginning, we get the big red lightsaber reveal. He says, I told you, you have to choose, live or die. And then he's got the red Sith eyes and the red lightsaber, and she says, no. And he says, incorrect. So it's at this point when Anakin's like, oh, you think my legacy is just a Vader? You think I'm only just Vader? Well, I'm not going to hide it or ignore that I used to be Vader. In fact, I'll actually show you right now that Vader will always be a part of me. And guess what? You're either going to strike me down in anger, or you're going to have to accept that I used to be Vader, and you're going to grow stronger from that. And so it's this point when he says, it's your choice, live or die. He's saying live and let go and accept that I used to be Vader and that I actually changed, or die in the Darth Vader mindset, being stuck in the shadows like you are, because essentially when you're the shadow warrior or the shadow of your former self, you're never going to be strong enough to win the fight for your life. Therefore, you'll die, because you'll be less powerful and impressive than you need to be. That's why Anakin is trying to cure her of that shadow so that she can be powerful enough to defeat Balin when she meets him again. And that's just like how Gandalf the Grey died and came back as Gandalf the White, the wizard that Middle-earth needed in order to fight the war, in order to be the version that's strong enough to win the fight. We get the thumbnail shot right here of Anakin in the shadows with his red lightsaber confronting shadowed Ahsoka with her still two blue lightsabers. And man, this fight, when it transitions into them being older and we still still have prime full potential Vader, I mean, goosebumps. I was freaking out when I first saw this. I mean, especially this part with the flashes of Vader. I mean, dude, that's so cold, man. So cold. Unreal. And he says, you lack conviction. That is what's holding her back. She has a lack of conviction. That's why she's not able to get over this. So my question then was, what was the moment she got her conviction back? How did she do that? Well, actually, it all ties right back to the Siege of Mandalore, where we just came from. Hear me out. Ahsoka's fight with full potential Darth Vader actually is a parallel to her fight on the Siege of Mandalore against Darth Maul. Think about it. Anakin just said, I gave you a choice. Live or die. And when Maul was fighting Ahsoka and had her pushed to the limit on those railings, what did he offer? It's at this point, Ahsoka actually ends up losing both of her lightsabers, just like what happens when she's fighting Anakin. And right here, her life is on the line. And Maul confronts her and pushes her to her limit. And what does he say? He doesn't say, the choice is yours, live or die, but he says, it's up to you. Join me or die. She says, never. Like, seriously, Maul saying, I'll give you one last chance, join me or die, is just like Anakin saying, I gave you a choice, live or die. And again, that's not where the similarities end, because like I just said, Ahsoka lost both her lightsabers when fighting Maul, and she loses both her lightsabers when she fights Anakin. It's right here, she's fighting with two sabers for a little bit. He's saying, you lack conviction, so it's time to die. Where is she going to get that conviction from? That conviction is her lacking in a belief in herself that she can do this, that she can beat him and beat the legacy of Darth Vader. But here's the thing, where does she get that strong belief and conviction from in this moment? Well, when Anakin is literally kicking away her sabers and again pushing her to the edge, what does she do? She dodges and weaves, and she uses Anakin's own need for victory that blinds him in order to steal his saber and defeat him in combat. And guess what move Ahsoka uses when she's fighting Maul when she doesn't have her sabers? Maul lunges at her with his sabers, and she dodges, weaves, grabs his saber, and throws it away, just like she did with Anakin. She dodged, weaved his saber thrusts because both of them were blinded by their need for victory. So she uses that to her advantage and grabs their own sabers and throws it away. So literally, Ahsoka gets the conviction to beat Anakin because she has done this before. She remembers, I was pushed to the limit and lost both my sabers against Maul at the Siege of Mandalore, where we just came from. So because I've done it before, I know I have the conviction and the belief that I can do it again right now. And this move of her grabbing the saber against Anakin is actually taught to her, probably most likely by Anakin, but it was probably taught to Anakin by Obi-Wan, because we see Obi-Wan do this to Anakin in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show in the Attack of the Clones flashback. It's right here when they're fighting and Anakin gets rid of Obi-Wan's saber. And then Anakin gets all cocky, says, there, it's over, you lost. And Obi-Wan says, Anakin, your need for victory, it blinds you, Anakin. And then what do we see? Oh, Obi-Wan dodge, weave, uses a little bit of force power, but he gets Anakin's saber from him. And he says, you're a great warrior, Anakin. Oh, warrior. But it's your need to prove yourself that'll be your undoing. And that's what happens when you give into the dark side. You have that need, that prideful pursuit of proving yourself that ultimately blinds you because it's your own undoing, and it causes you to make mistakes like lunging forward in the wrong way in order for your opponent to grab your saber, just like Ahsoka did to him. And obviously Darth Maul is a dark side user as well, so obviously he was also blinded by his pursuit of victory against her as well, which is why she as a Jedi was able to exploit that so well on Maul, and again on Darth Vader Anakin, who is clouded by his emotions. And just like Yoda says, the dark side, it's quicker, easier, more seductive, but it's not more powerful than the light side ultimately. And right here, when she throws away her saber, he realizes, oh, she learned her lesson. So she knows now that that legacy of Jedi teachings that's been passed on from Obi-Wan to Anakin to her, and that she's used against Maul and now used against Vader, she has beaten two of the biggest Sith Lords that has ever been. But that's what she needed to realize, is that, oh, everything that I have learned, everything that I am, it is more powerful than any form of dark side. Doesn't matter if it's the fallen chosen one or if it's Darth Maul. So personally, I just love that theory of how she got her conviction in this moment, which was because she remembers, oh, Clone Wars, Siege of Mandalore, where we just were, I fought Maul in a very similar way. Who, by the way, Anakin was pretty obsessed with Maul back in the day because he wanted to learn who killed his master Qui-Gon. So I think Anakin would replicate the fight with Maul to trigger that response of Ahsoka of being pushed to the limit. Now, what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose to live, or are you going to choose to die? And I think that part of Ahsoka getting that conviction, remembering she's been in this situation before, I think that is actually very similar to another famous movie scene that we're going to talk about right now real quick. Because at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry and Sirius Black are getting attacked by the Dementors, and when Harry's time traveling, he's like, don't worry, my dad's gonna come and save us. But Hermione's looking at Harry like, dude, Harry, no one's gonna come, you guys are dying. So this is the moment Harry realizes, oh, I have to be that guy. I have to literally be him and save myself, because, oh, he remembers it happened, and he remembers and realizes, I have done it before. That's why he has the conviction to pull off this Expecto Patronum right now and save his past version of himself. And that is exactly like Ahsoka beating Anakin without her sabers, because she remembers, oh, I've already done this. That's how you get the strongest sense of conviction, the strongest sense of belief in yourself, by remembering a time when you've done it before. And you just remember, oh, I've done this, I can do it again. Because right here, when Hermione asks him, how did you do it? Harry responds, well, I knew I could do it because I had already done it. So again, that strong sense of belief and conviction comes from a past experience where you know you've done it before. That's how you're able to overcome odds like that and get the conviction that Anakin said she was lacking. And for Ahsoka to just let go of the saber, let go of her hate and her anger towards him and towards herself, and to let go of all of those fears and doubts, that's the moment when she truly understands that within her is a legacy that is greater than Anakin's dark legacy. And she just defeated that dark legacy head on. So that proves it. Boom. The Jedi and my legacy that's within me is more powerful than the Darth Vader legacy. So now I can be the true Jedi Master and pass on what I know in that circle of life and pass that on to Sabine. And then Anakin looks at her and says, there's hope for you yet. And then all of a sudden he disappears. And this scene is actually just like the end of the Lion King Mufasa talk, because Mufasa says, remember, and then disappears. And then Simba's like, father, wait, don't go. And right after Anakin says there's hope for you yet, Anakin disappears, and she looks around and is like, Anakin, where'd you go? So all in all, what is the key point to Anakin's final lesson? Well, the idea is not to ignore or suppress or deny your inner shadows of doubts, fears, and hatred. You can't run from it. And also, the idea is not to embrace it or incorporate it into your being, because obviously that is not okay. Just because Anakin used the Sith eyes right there and became Vader for a moment, that was only to prove to her that her inner Jedi teachings is still more powerful than Vader. And he knows this because obviously he redeemed Anakin, beat Palpatine, and saved the galaxy. He knows the light side is stronger. So what's the key point? The key point is not to deny or incorporate your shadow. It's to accept your shadow as a past mistake, and to remember that a true Jedi Master is never too old to learn from those past mistakes and is always able to pass on that knowledge of learning from that mistake onto your apprentice. And that's how you fight for life. Anakin was hinting at this in the first Clone Wars flashback. He said, in order to fight a war, it's going to be inevitable. There's going to be a price that you have to pay. Sometimes mistakes happen. That's what he's saying. You have to accept the shadow part of you as a past mistake, just like he did. He accepted that Vader was a past mistake, and he knows as a true Jedi Master that he was never too old to learn that the Vader mindset was wrong, and that was a past mistake he could grow from. And guess what he's doing now? He's passing on that knowledge onto his apprentice Ahsoka for her to carry on that legacy. And one final reference and parallel I want to make that sums and wraps this video all up is this part right after the Mufasa talk when Simba talks to Rafiki. So Simba tells Rafiki that he knows what he has to do, but going back to Pride Rock means he has to face his past. And when talking about the past, he says, I've been running from it for so long. That's just like the problem Ahsoka had in the show. She was running away from her past and denying her place in the future because of this doubt of what her legacy is and what her legacy should be moving forward. She was running away and denying and wasn't confronting and dealing with it. But then Rafiki hits Simba with his stick and he's like, what was that for? And Rafiki says, it doesn't matter. It's in the past. And then Simba says, yeah, but it still hurts. And this is literally the conundrum Ahsoka was facing. She couldn't just run away from her past because it was still hurting her too much. And it was hurting her inner character. But then Rafiki addresses that line by saying, oh yes, the past can hurt. But the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. And then Simba dodges it and he's like, hey, you see? And that is such a key point to Anakin's final lesson, because even though the past mistakes that you have to accept can hurt, the way I see it, you can either run from it and not solve it, or learn from it and learn to prevent those past mistakes from happening again in the future. And then you could teach what you've learned onto others, which makes you a Jedi Master or the Lion King that you've always meant to be. So guys, that is going to be the video. I really hope you enjoyed. The links for the podcast are going to be in the description. There's links for Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So go and check those out and stay tuned. We got plenty more of Breakfast with Tedflix coming out this summer. I call myself Tedflix because I'm just shining God's created light for me through my body, just like a film reel. Because that's what they used to call movies back in the day, was flicks, because the light would flicker when being shown through a film reel. And I am chilling because I am trusting in the one who's above. He's got my back when no one else does. And it goes without saying, breakfast is the most important, best meal of the day, just like this is the most important and best movie and TV show podcast that you've ever listened to. And hey, the best part about it is you get to choose. You want to have your breakfast for dinner? You can do that. Want your breakfast for lunch? Go ahead and have brunch. But either way, have it with Tedflix. Thank you guys so much for watching. May the Force be with you, and take care of yourselves. Please take care of each other. Peace out.